into a corner.
Friends, your 60 seconds has not only expanded, it's now concluded. So we're going to turn it over to Mose, and he'll give us some very practical observations.
Thank you, Scott. Scott said, my name is Mose Stewart. I'm Chancellor of the Gulf Atlantic Diocese. I attend my parish, Christ Church, is in Montgomery, Alabama, and Gulf Atlantic covers at least 4 states. Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and I think there are parishes in Mississippi. We may be trying to move into Louisiana too, but I don't know. But in any event, so you can imagine that's quite a challenge for a chancellor to deal with. But I would like to tell you this. I looked around at the very beginning of this meeting and this session, and I listened to each of you introduce yourselves, and you gave me a hint as to what your experience is. And I'm just going to tell you that I felt immediately wholly unqualified to stand up here and address you. But at the same time, I then realized, well, I'm an employee of the state of Alabama, and being unqualified to do anything is the perfect qualification for having to do that. So maybe I'm not so, at least in my home state, I wouldn't be considered unqualified. But I was sitting home last year, kind of mid to late summer. I was minding my own business one weekend, and my phone rings, and I noticed that it's Neil Lamar. And he said, Mose, I have an issue for you to look at and to help me with. And I thought, oh, great, another little project I have to do, and I'm going to help the bishop, and that's all wonderful. And that's really basically been the scope of my experience as chancellor. But then he said the magic words, and it's not a good one. And that launched off into a situation, a disciplinary situation that has had, and as I think back on it, continues to have profound effect. It had a profound effect on me, not to mention the parish and the diocese itself. So my first reaction was immediately to push down the sense of panic that I had and this anxiety, and that's really what it was. I was very anxious about what Neil LeBar was describing to me, and that was in the initial stages. We weren't even really knowing everything about it, but I did not like hearing what I heard. And all these thoughts were rushing into my brain about how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that, where do we go from here, what's going to happen. And the lawyer part of me began to intrude upon the great, the wonderful spiritual aspects of what this process should be that we've heard about, talking about restoration and reformation and repentance, those types of things that are totally absent and totally foreign to secular law. But that's where we're trained, is in the secular law. And so my first thought was, how are we going to win? Well, and that ratchets up the pressure. You've got to win. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, that probably exposes to you that I'm probably not a great lawyer, because I probably should not have been thinking that way. But those were my thoughts. And it's set up there. This is my personal experience. So you're going to sit there and listen to my personal experience. And that's what I wanted to do initially. I wanted to win. And I was trying to think in my mind, without knowing anything of the facts, without knowing anything of the procedure, without knowing anything really about how this was going to work. I wanted to win. And that was the wrong step to make initially. So I got a suggestion to call some people. One of them was Jeff Garrity, who very generously spent a lot of time on the phone with me. And he sort of turned my attitude around a little bit, turned my orientation around of exactly what we should be trying to do here, and that helped. I spent a good bit of time. Phil Ashey talked to me on some other matters, kind of talked me off the ledge a little bit on some things. And so that's one of the things that I learned is you can lean on other people. There are other people who have experience in these things if you don't, and I didn't. And they can help you get through this. They can provide tremendous, not just substantive information, but counsel about how to handle these types of, this type of process. One of the things that I have a terrible habit of getting blinders on when I get focused on an issue. And I don't see peripherally what I probably need to see. And I'll tell you the one thing that sort of scared me as I look back on it, because this didn't come to me until very late in this process. And that was, by engaging in this process in the role of a chancellor, am I engaging in the practice of law? And that then implicates the question, this was going to take place in the state of Florida. Did I have to be licensed in the state of Florida, or did I have to have some sort of admission in the state of Florida in order to conduct an ecclesiastical trial? I didn't know. But I thought, I could probably get in a little bit of trouble if I'm deemed to be practicing law without a license in the state of Florida. Now, that probably, again, reflects poorly on me. That probably should have been one of the first things I thought about, but it wasn't at all. And I think because of our structure, diocese covering multiple states, that at least needs to be investigated early on and remedied early on. Again, I see you judging me out there. And so I will just go ahead and confess, that was really stupid. It really was. But hopefully, well, first of all, I hope I never have to go through this again. But if I do, I'm going to be more well prepared from that. And I need to get more information about whether or not that is an issue that I even need to be concerned about. And, so on the pump or stump thing, you cannot ask me about that because you'll stump me on that if you try. Communication is of vital importance. As I said, we're in multiple states. I'm in Alabama. All this took place in the state of Florida, in Tallahassee, which is about 200 miles southeast of where I live. Now, we have phones, we have email, we have text, we have all types of instantaneous communication that can take place. But I'm gonna tell you something, when you're not there, that feels like a universe away. It did to me. And you can easily be out of the communications loop when things start happening, because things get compressed when decisions have to be made, when people are being talked to, when investigations are being done by people that all are in the same place, and I'm out here. And that was an issue for me. Now, let me also, and I don't want to get too disjointed in any of this, but let me just say this. Neil Labar is my bishop. I love him dearly, and he is a great bishop. And he handled this situation with all the pastoral care, with the compassion, but with the authority of a bishop. He handled it, I thought he handled it very, very well. And everything ultimately turned out well. So I'm not casting aspersion at him or even complaining necessarily about him. I'm just saying that's a fact. When you're not in the locale, things can happen, and you feel like you lose control over some of that, and that you're not really a part of what's going on. Now, like I said, there's probably not an excuse for that from my standpoint, because there's all types of communications, but it's just, there's something about being there in the room or in the same locale that made it, that for me was a difference maker, and was an issue that had to be, an obstacle for me that had to be overcome. This process for me caused a lot of anxiety. It was something that I was unfamiliar with. I was uncomfortable with it. We have a little board that I deal with, and I've told some of you about it. It's an extremely boring board, but nobody seems to know about it. It's this little board that handles money claims against the state of Alabama that cannot be brought in court because the state has sovereign immunity and cannot be sued for money damages. But this little board has been empowered back in the 30s